You grew up making mixtapes, not playlists. You learned to read a map before GPS. You earned your first money mowing lawns or working behind the scenes, while the world around you changed so fast it sometimes felt like you were sprinting on a treadmill that never stopped. You are Generation X, the quietly forged middle child between boomers and millennials. This is the story the history books often skip. This is the story of a generation that built a lot, and was often asked to keep building, alone. Stay with me. By the end of this video I'll make a case. Gen X was crucial in shaping the modern world, and yet in the present day they face a suite of threats few are talking about. And that silence. It may cost them everything. Definitions matter. For clarity, when we say Generation X, in this video we're using the widely accepted definition, people born roughly between 1965 and 1980. That's the generation who came of age in the late 1970s, the 1980s, and the 1990s, the kids who bridged analog and digital. Many major research institutions use these birth years in studies and data that we'll draw from. Gen X grew up in an era of contradictions. Post-war prosperity receded into the inflation and recession of the 1970s and early 1980s. At the same time, cultural innovation exploded: punk, indie rock, hip-hop, independent cinema, and the first personal computers arrived in homes. Gen X kids navigated rising divorce rates, shifting household structures, and a changing job market that demanded flexibility. That environment created a generation known for self-reliance, skepticism, and a healthy distrust of grand narratives. They were the last generation to experience childhood largely without screens, and the first to be expected to adopt the internet and mobile tech as adults. That adaptability has been a defining trait. Let's be specific. Gen Zers were not just passive witnesses to change, they were architects. They built critical parts of the internet age, early engineers, product managers, and founders who launched companies that now underpin our daily lives. Led cultural revolutions in music, film, and literature, the indie film boom, alt-rock, and cultural forms that still dominate global media. Filled key leadership roles in business and government at a time when organizations demanded nimble problem solvers, not hierarchical managers. Acted as a stabilizing workforce, flexible, experienced, and often carrying heavy responsibilities both at work and at home. These achievements matter because they weren't performed from some privileged safety net. For many Gen Zers, career and financial progress came while navigating economic shocks, making their successes quieter but, arguably, more resilient. Now the other side, the sustained structural problems that have kept Gen X from the straightforward prosperity enjoyed by some boomers, and that now threaten their stability in retirement and old age. 1. Major financial setbacks at career-critical moments. Gen X experienced severe wealth shocks at ages when they should have been saving and investing. The dot-com crash of 2000 and the Great Recession of 2008 hit many Gen X households hard, during prime earning years, undermining retirement savings and home equity. Research and reporting show Gen X suffered dramatic net worth losses in the Great Recession, and for many the recovery has been incomplete. These losses happened during crucial years for compounding returns and retirement contributions. 2. The sandwich generation, pressure, caring for kids and aging parents. A huge share of Gen Zers are balancing care for both children and elderly parents. In the US, people in their 40s are the age group most likely to be sandwiched between dependent children and aging parents. That reality costs time, money, and mental bandwidth, and it often reduces the ability to pursue career moves or catch up on retirement savings. 3. Retirement readiness, worrying signs. A recent survey finds more than half of Generation Zers say they don't think they'll be ready for retirement, an alarming number as the oldest Gen Zers cross 60. Multiple factors explain this: interrupted saving during recessions, fewer traditional pensions, caregiving costs, and rising living costs. 4. Housing squeeze and regional differences, UK and US. In the UK and US, housing has become a major fault line. Older generations, many boomers, benefited from decades of rising property values and in many cases are mortgage-free. Younger generations have found entry much harder. Gen X sits between those squashed groups. Many got on the ladder, Others were hit by recessions that flattened their equity gains. The long-term shift in housing wealth has intensified intergenerational tensions. These four structural pressures, wealth shocks, caregiving burdens, retirement insecurity, and housing inequality, combine to create a precarious present for many Gen X households. Statistics are important, but so are stories. Meet Sarah, 52, working full-time while caring for an 82-year-old mother and a college-aged child. She delayed promotions to keep schedule stability, and her retirement account has never fully recovered from the 2008 losses. Mark, 57, who bought a modest home in 1998, saw its value boom by 2006, lost half his paper wealth in 2008, and now worries about fixed incomes if interest rates and living costs continue rising. Those are typical, not exceptional. They illustrate how middle-of-life shocks and responsibilities create long tails of financial stress. Let's return to wins. Gen X has disproportionately shaped modern culture. Directors, musicians, entrepreneurs, journalists, and innovators who defined late 20th and early 21st century tastes and technologies. They were the ones who carried the baton from analog to digital, translating old media into new forms, and often doing the heavy lifting inside companies, institutions, and governments. These are not small cultural footnotes. They're large, structural contributions to how the current world communicates, entertains, governs, and builds industry. To keep this balanced, let's hear the competing narratives, fairly presented. From many millennials' perspective, they argue the world that Gen X inherited is not the world they face. High housing prices, high student debt, precarious gig economy jobs, and climate anxiety have shaped a very different set of challenges. Younger adults point out that technology, new industries, and activism have opened avenues of influence for them that Gen X didn't have, and that some of Gen X's cautiousness can look like conservatism or stubbornness to younger people. From many boomers' perspective, some say Gen X had more opportunities than millennials and that the emphasis on intergenerational victimhood is overstated. Neither of those broad frames is universally true, and both contain important points, but they are generalizations. The reality is complex. Different subgroups within each generation face different realities depending on race, class, geography, gender, and luck. Why does intergenerational friction feel so heated? 3 drivers. Resource competition, finite jobs, housing, and pensions create zero-sum pressure. Narrative scarcity, media wants simple stories, winners and losers, so nuance is compressed into viral sound bites. Different frameworks, each generation evaluates fairness by the lens of their formative experience. Gen X counts grit and resilience, millennials emphasize structural barriers and collective action. These differences become combustible when overlaid with politics and economic anxiety. Here's the central controversy of this video. Are Zers forgotten, squeezed between privileged boomers and loudly visible millennials, or are they the survivors who quietly benefit by virtue of adaptability and timing? The forgotten case, many Gen Zers face the exact consequences we described earlier: retirement risk, caregiving burdens, and lower than expected net worth for their age. Public policy and media attention often focus on youth poverty or elderly poverty, leaving middle-aged Gen Zers in a policy blind spot. The survivor advantage case. Other arguments say Gen X's adaptability, their ability to pivot between industries and technologies, gave them latent power and influence. While not uniformly wealthy, many Gen Zers occupy managerial and executive roles, giving them institutional power even if their personal finances are precarious. Both sides contain truth. That gray zone is where the debate should live, and where this video wants to push you to decide. Now the scary part. Imagine these plausible near-future scenarios. A large portion of Gen X reaches traditional retirement age with weak savings and higher living costs and ends up dependent on patchwork support, straining public services and families. Caregiving responsibilities escalate, more people must choose between work and eldercare, reducing workforce participation and producing burnout mental health crises. Intergenerational political backlash. Ignored economic grievances produce populist anger that falters into polarized politics, with Gen X caught in the middle. These aren't cinematic hypotheticals, they are policy and demographic trajectories backed by data on saving, wealth and caregiving. If policymakers continue to focus only on extremes, the very young or the very old, this middle group could be left to weather a painful transition alone. Okay, not all is doom. Gen X's experience and institutional presence provide some protective factors. Many Zers hold senior roles across business, academia, and government and can influence policy and corporate culture. Their adaptability, familiarity with analog and digital systems, makes them effective cross-generational translators in workplaces. Community-level solutions are possible. Intergenerational co-housing, employer caregiving support, and targeted financial planning can relieve pressure. These aren't silver bullets, but paired with policy changes, affordable housing, caregiving support, retirement incentives, outcomes can improve. Concrete ideas: what could help Gen X survive and thrive? Policy: strengthen caregiving supports and tax credits, expand employer incentives for phased retirement, and ensure public pension stability to avoid sharp cliff effects for cohorts approaching retirement. Workplace: flexible working hours for caregivers, phased retirement options, training subsidies for mid-career transitions. Personal/community: financial planning targeted at Gen X realities, caregiver support networks, intergenerational community programs to share housing and resources. These options reduce risk and can rewire the narrative from forgotten to supported and active. Let's light the comments on fire. Here are the questions I want you to argue about right now in the chat. Is Gen X more forgotten than helped, or are they the quiet backbone of modern institutions? Should public policy prioritize the sandwiched middle, Gen X, or the extremes, young and old? Are cultural perceptions of Gen X as ironic and laid back, hiding real economic pain? Or is that caricature itself a form of privilege? Answer with stories, not slogans. Tell us a specific person you know who illustrates your point. A quick ethics note. Intergenerational conversations often slide into blame: they took our housing, or they have it easy. That is rarely accurate and almost never useful. The structural problems we face are the result of policy choices, economic shifts, and global markets, not moral failures of entire age cohorts. Productive change requires coalition building across generations, not mutual annihilation. Gen X taught us resilience. They taught us to solve problems quietly and carry heavy loads. But resilience should not be confused with unlimited capacity. It's time to make the quiet visible, through policy, workplace change, and social recognition. If you are younger, ask how you can partner with Gen X rather than write them off. If you are older, ask how to share power and resources instead of gatekeeping. If you are Gen X, speak up. Share your story. If you found this video revealing, do 3 things that help keep the conversation alive. Hit like, it tells YouTube that this topic matters. Subscribe and ring the bell. We'll be doing follow-up discussions and live debates where you can argue with me and other viewers. Comment below with one sentence: I am Gen X and I feel. Or, I'm not Gen X but here's what I think. The best comments will be featured in the follow-up episode. And if you share personal stories in the comments, please be kind. We will moderate for respectful debate. I'm Matt. You know the world a little better now. Stay curious. Stay skeptical. And I'll see you in the comments.